offered by the graduate school is not intended to compete with offerings by degree programs, which are best suited and tailored to students' discipline-specific needs, but are instead designed to complement those offerings with high-quality, innovative professional development programming and to prepare graduate students for a variety of meaningful career options after degree. So to achieve this overall goal, we employ collaborative planning, collective implementation, and comprehensive evaluation strategies. And now to move on to the topic of today's webinar, which is networking, learning the art of building your network. Building a network is as much an art as it is a science, and one of the areas of interest most often expressed by graduate students. In fall 2016, we focused on networking for one of the Professional Development Fridays and also had a Twitter chat, which we'll be doing again today right after today's webinar if you use Twitter. Join us following the hashtag GradProfDev to engage with University of South Carolina alumni of graduate degree programs to start right away with practicing some of the skills that I will share today. In spring 2017, we held an in-person networking event with graduate alumni, and this fall, we are hosting this webinar and the Twitter chat, as I mentioned. And in spring 2018, we will seek to offer additional programs designed to enhance the networking skills of graduate students, because networking skills are so critical to your professional development and building your professional networks. On today's webinar, I'm going to cover a lot of ground on this topic of networking. If we have time at the end, I'll start the process of showing you a network activity to help you deliberately apply what you've learned today. So in today's webinar, I'll talk about defining a network and networking, the benefits of networking, preferred style so that you can learn how to network it within what's comfortable for you, types of networking, this term conference commando, one of my new favorites over the last year in doing this work, informational interviews, using LinkedIn, the networking activity that I mentioned. I'll share a few other resources as well as highlight some of our upcoming events. So today's learning objectives on today's webinar on networking are to discuss strategies for making connections and building relationships with professionals for now and for the future, and how to do this strategically and effectively. Oftentimes, graduate students may underestimate the importance and value of networking early on in a degree program. Networking is critical across all phases of a graduate degree program and essential to future opportunities. Research shows that the best jobs are never advertised, and 85% of all jobs are secured through networking. This is true on the graduate level as well. A second element of learning how to network is, again, doing it well, that strategic and effective part. This is how you'll be able to network and enhance effectively, strategically, and enhance and grow your professional network. So let's get started with a couple of definitions. So first, a network. I feel it's important to start out with these definitions to lay the groundwork for how we're going to talk about enhancing and building your network using different strategies. So a network is a formal web of systematically developed contacts and relationships. So let's break this down and notice a few of the words used in this definition. So first, formal. This means something intentional and defined. So your network is just not that I'm a really well-networked person, but that you're able to be intentional in building the network and define your network. And the word systematic, which refers to a deliberate process. So in order to develop a network, intentionality, definition, and being deliberate are key components. If a network is the end product, getting to the product is the act of networking. Networking is the process of interacting with individuals who have interests similar to yours, who are willing to share information about those common interests, or provide the names of others with similar interests. So as with the previous definition of a network, let's dig a little deeper here. So first, a process. This is something that happens over time and is sequential and chronological in its order. Second, the word interacting. So network is interacting, and that implies reciprocity. To talk or do something with other people, to come together and have an effect on each other. So there's bidirectionality in this process of networking. Third, shared interests. Identifying people who have shared interests is an important step in the networking process. And while shared interests may be the way in which you build your network, reaching out to folks who don't currently share your interests and may share your interests is a piece of this too. Fourth, willing to share information. Reciprocal and interacting have an effect on each other, and doing this through a willingness to share information about common interests. Fifth, and perhaps one of the most undersold benefits of networking, aiding in your connection to others. Have you ever asked someone if they know so-and-so and they say yes, and they make that connection for you? That's because that person who agreed to make the connection is in your network and willing to help extend his or her network to you, which is a huge benefit. And as graduate students in particular, having a mentor or mentors who are willing to let you tap into their networks is incredibly valuable. So these selected words in a definition of networking reflect intentionality, definition, and being deliberate. And network is the process of developing these contacts and provides a way to exchange information, increase confidence, refine communication skills, get advice and seek moral support, meet new people, and form ongoing lifelong professional relationships. So let's move into some of the other benefits, because there are many benefits of networking and only a few listed here. In The Art of Schmoozing, How Networking Really Works, the author Colette A.M. Phillips refers to your network as your net worth. So your network is your net worth. That's because having people as part of your network increases your value and your connectedness, which can be very desirable to joining research and scholarly teams, to joining professional organizations, to being invited, engaged into other organizations that are of interest to you that can help advance your career. And further, Colette Phillips addresses the importance of networking as being a mutually beneficial endeavor. So networking should be mutually beneficial, and the most successful professionals know and understand that networking is a two-way street. Networking relationships should be mutually beneficial to each party. So it's not just what's in it for me, it's also what's in it for the other person with whom I'm trying to establish a connection. So in fact, when it comes to networking, it's better to err on the side of giving than receiving. And you'll hear some of those tips from Keith Ferrazzi when I talk about being a conference commando a little bit later in the webinar. Everybody has something to give, and in today's Grad Prof Dev blog by Angie Davis, who is the president of Fight Colorectal Cancer, she says that everybody you meet knows something you do not. And never has that been more true than when you're starting to build your network. And so the most valuable networking currency is information and how you can contribute to making this a mutually beneficial endeavor. In order to experience the benefits of networking, you also have to take time to think about the way in which you network. So of these many benefits, especially on the employment side of things, there's also ways for you to learn more about the landscape of the industry in which you seek to work, whether that's looking at an academic setting, a nonprofit setting, true industry settings, or other viable and meaningful career options for you. Those are an important part of the networking process, but not the end-all, because you can learn more about people and the work they do and just the general setting in which you may work. Networking happens all the time. every day and everywhere. And being prepared to network is important because networking happens all the time. You never know who you're going to run into, or you never know who you'll have the chance to meet. So networking can happen in your daily work, every day through your activities, class, meetings, lab, sharing office space, engaging in other scholarly activities. You have the opportunity to network. Some of the people around you today while you're a graduate student will become important connectors for you going forward and throughout your professional career. Take advantage of these opportunities. Networking happens at professional meetings and conferences, and I'll spend a lot more time on this, on the act of networking, to help you achieve this conference commando status, as Keith Ferrazzi calls it. For graduate students, especially if you're nearing the time for a job search, professional meetings and conferences are your main jam, especially with 85% of jobs obtained and identified through networking. Informational interviews are a strategic way to build your network while learning about someone and his or her position. And I'll dig a little bit deeper into those today as well. LinkedIn and other forms of social media have emerged as important ways of making initial connections, following through on those connections, making a plan to meet, to engage in deeper and more meaningful communication as part of networking, and building your professional network. So what is your preferred style? Extroverted or introverted? So in the chat function or in the question function, for those of you who are listening to the webinar live, using the chat or question function, tell me, what is your preferred style? Is it extroverted or introverted? All right, I see one response so far of someone who has an extroverted style. Another extroverted style. All right, well, we have a couple of extroverted style, and perhaps we have some others. So let's start with this process of thinking about your preferred networking style. A combination approach is generally one of the more effective, but depending on your own personal style, you may prefer more in-person strategies or more online strategies. And maybe you're a blend of both, or maybe it depends on what day it is. So I am generally more of an extroverted person, but I have days in which I do not have the energy to interact with people and prefer to lay back. Knowing this is part of the way for you to be strategic and effective and have a plan that suits your preferred style and your preferred style in different settings. So consider that and think through what is most comfortable to you, because that's going to determine how you come up with a plan to do this work of establishing and building your network. Networking is inherently a social sport. So that can mean that having an extroverted style, as I already said, that is my default style. Having an extroverted style may make networking more natural, but that does not have to always be the case. Networking does not always come easily for everybody who's an extrovert or has an extroverted style. You may feel comfortable connecting with people one-on-one or at a networking event, but to truly get the most out of every networking experience, you should keep the following in mind. Although you are excited about networking, there are ways you need to keep yourself in check in order to be successful. So in the following tips that I'm going to share, which are adapted from Kimberlite Coaching, which is an excellent online resource to help you think more about networking, keep this in mind. So networking can be overwhelming for some, even if you think that's not you, because you're extroverted, you enjoy being around people, you enjoy meeting new people. As an extrovert, networking can be really exciting. You get to meet new people, connect on a deeper level, further your professional relationship, and build each other up. I get excited just thinking about this idea of networking, but just because networking isn't overwhelming for you as an extrovert doesn't mean that some people aren't completely freaking out while they're trying to network. And this doesn't really have anything to do with you, and you can't really take it personally. So it's important to take a step back and figure out who exactly in a scenario may be overwhelmed. And everyone processes things very differently. So remembering that can help you stay on track. Your extrovertedness or list those are both wonderful things, and there's plenty of different strategies and ways that you can network by being you and being comfortable. So here are some tips if you're networking with an extroverted style to keep in mind. So first off, remember personal space. I'm a hugger and a handshaker, and not everybody is. And so before I hug, I definitely ask. And shaking hands has become, of course, more commonplace and an appropriate gesture when meeting someone for the first time or reconnecting with someone. But not everybody appreciates physical contact, and so it's important to keep that in mind. Recognize when you come on too strong. It's easy to get really excited when you're talking about your work and what you're doing and what you want to do, something you're deeply passionate about. So be self-aware of that and make sure that you're not coming on too strong and not pushing too hard or dominating the conversation, because remember, networking should be something that should be mutually beneficial and have a degree of reciprocity. Make space for others. This is truly one of your gifts one of our gifts, your gifts as an extrovert, for those of you who identify with that style. If at any point you realize that you're the only one talking, you have to be able to interject questions or ways in which to engage others, because there's always room. Remember, everyone you meet knows something you don't. Give yourself a time frame and make sure that you monitor this, because you may feel tempted as an extrovert to be the last one to leave every time because you enjoy it so much, but you have to take care of yourself and engage in appropriate self-care and give yourself a time frame for that. Make sure that when you're listening actively. And this goes along with allowing for figurative space at the table. You don't have to fill every lull with random conversation. You want your conversation to be intentional when you're working to build a network. Ask the right questions. Small talk and personal questions may come easily to you, but for an introvert, this may not be the case. And so when you're talking to someone, you have to keep in mind that the other person may be feeling overwhelmed. And so focus on what they're passionate about and respect it when they shy away and don't want to talk about certain things. And lastly, a really important point, I think, is we don't need to fix introverts. Just because networking may come more naturally to an extrovert, it doesn't mean that there's any need to fix introverts. Folks who identify with an introverted style can network just as well. And maybe it works a little differently, but extroverts and introverts can both engage in style-appropriate strategies to network effectively. So networking with an introverted style is possible, but it's important to consider these different characteristics. So first, respect your energy for people time, whatever that may be. Plan time before and after you're making connections to rejuvenate alone or with a single person or a trusted person or very small group. Don't feel like you have to network every day or on days when you can't predict how you're going to feel in interacting with people. Use one-to-one networking strategies as much as possible. Try to limit or avoid opportunities in large groups or people who you don't know well. Those highly social, opportunistic forms of networking are only one way that you can network strategically and effectively. There are other strategies that we'll talk about today that may be a more logical step for those who identify with a more introverted style. Use email when possible and appropriate. Many people are on email. Everybody we know is on email. Very few people we know are not. And some folks prefer email to talking on the phone or face-to-face contact. And email can be a great way to gain comfort with someone before you may engage in a telephone conversation or a face-to-face meeting. Do as much reading research as possible before you network, because for someone who has a more introverted style, information is power and will help you feel more confident when you approach a contact. So Search out people, take a look at their LinkedIn profile, Google them, become more comfortable and confident before you engage in networking steps or activities. Write down questions and topics that you want to cover. It's really recommended that for anyone that you write down some questions or topics that you want to discuss in advance of an in-person networking encounter. If possible, plan your networking contacts according to when your personal energy is the highest. So if you know you do better in the early morning, try to plan your networking activities in the early morning. If you know that you do better later in the afternoon or in the evening, do it then. If it's a day that you don't feel it, don't worry. There's always going to be tomorrow for you to start this process of building your network. There are two main types or categories of networking: in-person networking, which can happen one-on-one, a group, or in some type of face-to-face setting, and then electronic and online social networking. And I'm going to spend some time talking about both of those and include information on how you may know which type is best for you depending on your preferred style. So first, let's take a look at in-person networking. In-person and electronic and online social networking are not completely separate approaches. Electronic networking can lead to in-person networking opportunities, and often a combination approach is what results in a strong, durable, and large network of professional contacts. In-person networking requires people to talk to one another, talking to one another to make connections. This can happen during brief encounters, running into someone at Target or the grocery store, during scheduled meetings that you have planned and prepared for, also through informational interviews, which are a more formal approach, and I'll share more tips on doing those later. In-person networking may happen in a one-to-one format or in a group format, and group networking is becoming more popular as others in the group may ask questions that you want to ask, and everyone always has something to contribute. So recently, I was part of a networking breakfast at a professional conference, and they assigned those of us who were serving in more of a mentor role to a table, and then we had 8 mostly graduate students join our table for conversations and to connect and learn about the work that we're doing. It was a great exercise, and it was very clear that people at the table who were asking questions had those same questions or hadn't thought of some of the questions that were asked and found the experience to be very meaningful. So group networking can be a great alternative for those who feel comfortable in that setting. To be strategic and effective in your networking activities, you're going to need a plan, the always required plan. In-person networking requires advanced planning on some level. You always want to be prepared to take advantage of a networking opportunity. In-person networking allows you to connect in a way that may be viewed as more personal, and the ability to see how someone responds and reacts as well as speaks can provide key nonverbal cues that are important to establishing a relationship with somebody who may be a part of your network. Some of this, of course, may be reflected by using, Google Hangouts, Skype, FaceTime, or other Zoom meeting or other strategies where you can see each other, but it's still a style of in-person or face-to-face networking. So as part of this plan, and in order to be very prepared overall for in-person networking, talk about your networking ideas with your mentors and with your fellow graduate students. Learn about how they network and their experiences, and then as you're gathering that information, come up with a plan for how you can be most effective as somebody who's networking. Take inventory of opportunities that are on your calendar for the upcoming weeks and months. Come up with a plan in advance for each of those opportunities. Who's going to be there with whom you want to talk? What opportunities will you have to connect with that person? And lastly, follow-up is critical. To refer back to Colette Phillips's article, The Art of Schmoozing, the guiding rule is to always follow up with an email, or even better, a handwritten thank you note within 48 hours of meeting someone, but never longer than a week. And in the blog I referenced earlier that was written by Angie Davis, one of her main points is the follow-up. She said that just because you have a business card doesn't mean you're connected. So make sure to follow up when doing this in-person networking. And to help you remember, use a journal or use a business card exchange to be able to write a note to help you make your follow-up even more personal than you may otherwise. You can reference some shared experience or shared story between you and the person with whom you're connecting to help deepen that connection. I really like these 4 ups, which come from Colette Phillips's article, The Art of Schmoozing. So 4 ups into networking in person. Read up, so do your planning in advance. Show up, so be present when you're there. Listen up, do a lot of listening as much as you're sharing information, and follow up. So read up, show up, listen up, and follow up. Those 4 ups are a surefire way to be effective and strategic in your in-person networking. So next, let's go to electronic and online social networking, which again is not necessarily separate from in-person networking, but some of the strategies are slightly different. Online electronic and social networking is another method or tool for establishing your professional network. Online networking, including sites such as LinkedIn, build communities with others who share common interests or activities. So some benefits to professional online networking are that distance is no object. What a great resource for graduate students and faculty and those who are conducting research regardless of the setting, to be able to send an email, make a phone call, and reach out and engage with our colleagues from around the world with distance being no object. I think back to when I was in undergrad and I wanted to use a survey tool that had been developed by someone who was a professor at a university in Texas. It took forever to try to find a phone number to reach out to her, and I actually was never successful in that way, but I mailed her a letter with a postage-paid returned envelope should she be willing to share a copy of her survey with me that I had read about through a journal article, which I went to the library to secure. So that type of connection and networking is much faster now, with distance being no object and the ability to just reach out and connect with someone. And interestingly enough, I have run into this professor many times since then, and she loves the story about how when I was an undergrad and first reached out to her, and I've continued to follow her work and likewise be able to connect with her when we see each other in person. So now I can just quickly email her to have that connection. Providing access to a large number of experienced professionals and resources is another tremendous benefit of online and social networking. It also eases the ability to research an organization, including its financial health and track record. So as part of your planning, you can just jump online and do a search to find this information. It gives increased visibility and increases your chance of finding people who have shared or similar educational and work backgrounds. And this, of course, can be done 24/7. So if you're up in the middle of the night, if that's how you work most effectively, you'd be able to do that as well. So here's a list of different options for electronic and online social networking. Of course, there's email, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and more. And I should say that LinkedIn is truly thought of as the main networking social media site for professional networking. And I'll spend a little time later in the webinar on how you can be sure to impress with your LinkedIn profile. Earlier, I referenced your social media, footprint and what that looks like when you're networking and wanting to make sure that if you have posts on Facebook and Twitter and you're driving people to those resources, that you're certainly making sure that you're putting your best foot forward in that footprint. That's only one aspect of the importance of following sort of recommended guidelines for how to use online social tools to network. So let's start first with this list of do's. So do this. Do use professional networking sites like LinkedIn as compared to Facebook. This means LinkedIn is an online tool that's actually built and made for networking, whereas Facebook, efforts to network may be lost amidst photos of cute kids, cat videos, recipes, and other noise. Do include a professional picture. Remove any online information that is unprofessional. Get rid of the photos of you that have been cropped from group photos with family and friends, and get a professional headshot taken, a professional headshot. If the JCPenney portrait fee is beyond your graduate student budget, and by the way, the JCPenney portrait fee is $9.99 per person for photos, have someone with an iPhone put it on the portrait setting and get a good photo of you. It goes without saying that photos that are unprofessional should not be used. Create statements with key skills and accomplishments that would be similar to a resume or CV, and ensure that your information is accurate and truthful. Use industry or field or discipline-specific keywords. This is where you want to use jargon to connect to people who potentially share a mutual interest or with you and may want to connect. Use professional communication methods. So in other words, unless you have a developed relationship with someone with whom you're connecting, do not text, call, or email until you have established that relationship. Now let's move over into the don'ts. Don't do this. Do not lie. Do not falsify or embellish information. Make sure that what you're sharing is truthful and accurate. Do not write negative remarks about organizations, employers, colleagues, or yourself. Even if it has nothing to do with the person with whom you're trying to connect, it reflects negatively on you as a person. Do not state that you are searching for a job if your current employer is unaware that you are. Keep in mind the public settings of your social media. And if you are on the job market as a graduate student, you do want to let people know that you are seeking employment opportunities. Don't provide updates on irrelevant activities. So keep your LinkedIn profile or other social media designated for professional networking. Don't use text message language, except in a text with someone you have an existing relationship. Don't use that text message language. These do's and don'ts may seem simple and understood, but you may be surprised, or maybe not, by the violations of these do's and don'ts that are out there. One of my favorite recent resources to come my way is Keith Ferrazzi's conference Commando recommendations. Many years ago, I realized I was somewhat unique among my colleagues for how I have always approached professional conferences and scientific meetings. Even as I'm more experienced in my field, I continue to be surprised by how many others don't use these strategies. To me, every conference is an opportunity for me to build and grow my network for myself, but also for my students, especially my graduate students. A conference is a huge opportunity to build relationships with extraordinary people, people who might have significant impact on your professional or personal success. And to make sure that you maximize the return on your and your organization's investment of time and money to attend the conference, you can't afford to be a conference commoner. You have to be a conference commando. So Keith Ferrazzi's resource is available online. and I've shared the PDF with you down below. So again, a conference is a tremendous opportunity. So first, remember the 7 P's. Proper prior planning prevents piss-poor performance. So this means that you have to be prepared and have a plan. So take time weeks before the conference to think through and write down why you are attending and who you want to meet there at the conference. In today's world of professional meetings, most have an online agenda, and many have the complete names of those who are attending and certainly those who are presenting. So plan in advance to avoid piss-poor performance. Second, know your targets. Again, take a look at that list of conference attendees. Call the conference organizers or email the conference organizers if the information isn't publicly available. And go through that list and see who's on the list that you want to meet. Number 3, gather intelligence. If you want to get to know someone, the first thing you should do is figure out how you can help them. So take some time in advance to Google them and learn about their work and learn about who may be in your network. Even as a graduate student, you have a network that can be valuable in making these connections. So gather intelligence and always make a special effort to inquire about the people that you'd like to meet. People like that. People like to know that you took a look and saw that so-and-so is attending this conference and are looking to meet this person. Number 4, strike early. Don't wait for the conference to start your networking. You can send emails in advance. You can arrange to meet in advance of the conference should your travel schedule and the travel schedule of the other person allow. Maybe you can have a phone conversation before. Take advantage of the opportunity to reach out before the madness of a professional conference may begin. Number 5 is never attend a conference. Just don't attend it. Make sure that when you're there that you're using your time wisely to connect and build your network. If you have the chance at a conference and there's an opportunity to ask a question, this is a great way to get noticed and perhaps have others approach you after a session to find out who are you working with, what are you doing related to your question. So when you do ask a question, make sure that you stand tall, you say your name and your affiliation so that people can make note of that. Number 6, slight the speakers. So what this means is don't waste time standing in line to meet a speaker after a presentation. Try to see them beforehand or try to make arrangements to see them at another time. Number 7, get a wingman, or my edition, a wingwoman. So people can work very effectively with a buddy, providing assistance at conferences. I saw this in action at a recent conference, where a group of graduate students and new faculty were talking about wanting to meet someone who was more senior in the field and was present at the conference. And through that conversation, someone said, well, I know so-and-so who works with him. And so that started the process of them all working together so that they'd have a chance to meet this person. Number 8, draft off a big kahuna. So get to know some of the most well-known people at a conference and hang out with them. If your mentor is a big kahuna, hang out with them as well, because that'll help you tap into their larger network. Number 9, be an info hub. When you're going to a conference, get really familiar with the conference program, know where people can go for resources, know where the lost and found is, know where the closest FedEx is, figure out the lay of the land and be familiar, because that can be a tremendous asset for you in your conversations. Number 10, work hard on the break. Don't run away during the break. This is when you should get out there and do what you really came to the conference to do, and that's meet people. Number 11, hijack a dinner. Keith Ferrazzi says, True commandos are not constrained by the agendas they receive at registration. So what he means by this is if you see a group of people, including people you want to meet and connect with, having drinks in the hotel bar, go right on up there. Buy yourself a drink, buy them a drink, and start the conversation. If you see somebody in line at the Starbucks who you want to meet, go ahead and jump in line and start that conversation. There's usually a chance to connect with this hijacked strategy. Number 12, let your guard down. Make sure that you try to connect with people on a personal level, but in a professional way. Number 13, master the deep bump. So once you've had a conversation with a new acquaintance at a conference, don't spend too much time there. You miss out on meeting a number of other people. Number 14, take names and notes. As I mentioned earlier, carry with you a small journal or a notebook, or take notes on your phone if it's not distracting, or write on the back of a business card so that you can quickly know who the person is, their affiliation, and how you've made a connection. And lastly, follow up or fail. Don't wait too long to follow up, and always make sure to follow up in order to substantiate that connection that you've worked so hard to make. And hopefully it's more than one. So to be a conference commando, the next time you plan to go to a professional conference or meeting, take time to plan in advance. In the past few years, there's been a lot of interest in informational interviews. And informational interviews are a formal tool for you to get deep with someone who may have information of value to you and for you to learn more about the requirements of a position. So an informational interview is an informal conversation with someone working in an area that interests you who will give you information and advice. It's an effective research tool in addition to reading books, exploring the internet, and examining job descriptions. Generally speaking, an informational interview is not a job interview, and the objective is not necessarily to find job openings. So there are many benefits of informational interviewing. They allow you to get first-hand relevant information about a particular field, learn about career paths that you maybe hadn't even considered, get tips about how to get into a particular line of work, learn what it is like to work at a specific organization, get insider knowledge that may help you in the future with your process of applying for a job, and initiate a professional relationship and expand your network of contacts. So here are 6 steps for informational interviewing. I really like this resource from which this material is adapted on informational interviewing. It's from Cal Berkeley. So they talk about researching career fields by doing some initial research on the career field, identify people to interview, pursue your own contacts, talk to your mentors, people you've met at conferences, find names of alumni, people in your department who maybe have gone on to do work that's of interest with you. And you can do informational interviews over the phone, via other online tools, or you can do them in person. Make sure you always prepare for the interview. Make sure you have an introduction for yourself that you've practiced and what are your goals for the meeting, and plan a lot of questions to ask. Initiate contact, so contact the person by phone or email. Let them know how you may know them or how you got their name. Ask if it's a good time to check in with them, and find out when you might be able to make a 20 to 30-minute appointment with them. Conduct the informational interview in a professional manner. You can always bring a resume or CV, but don't pull it out right away. It may be something to provide at the end. And always make sure to follow up. Keep records. So right after the interview, write down what you've learned, what more you'd like to know, your impressions, and make sure to send a thank you note. And I mentioned earlier preparing questions, and you'll see the asterisks on this particular slide. Here are some examples of the types of questions to ask during an informational interview. And of course, you can make sure to target questions that are appropriate for your career field and stage of decision making. And you can ask general topics about the nature of a person's work, how to get started in the field, effective approaches for a job search, and just in general, learn about the person with whom you're having this informational interview. One aspect of using LinkedIn with over 100 million users worldwide is that it's the biggest social network focused on promoting professional connections. So that's already a really good reason for you to set up a LinkedIn account if you don't already have one and join this vast network of professionals that connect through this tool. And there are several different strategies that you can use when you're trying to prepare your LinkedIn profile, but here are a few. And these are from a U.S. News report, recommendations that they made. Making sure that you use a compelling headline and also a headline that is going to be able to be read from a mobile device. So sometimes when you look at your profile online, using a laptop or desktop or a tablet, you'll see something very different than when you're looking at a mobile device. So make sure you have a professional photo, summarize your story, list your work experience, and add your skills. Don't forget to include your education, and that can include a degree that you're currently pursuing. Make sure to describe your volunteer work and show off. You want to make sure you're always being truthful and accurate, but show off your skills a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. So to this point, I've covered some basics of networking, different types of networking, and tools to help you network. I want to take a few minutes to return to the basics of networking, and that includes considering your network. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk through an activity that may be a useful exercise for you to consider your current and desired network. Part of taking steps to improve or building your network requires assessment and reflection that's going to lead to an informed plan. So first off, here's information on the activity. You're going to think about your current network and your desired network. How are you going to sustain at least one of your current network contacts, and how are you going to add one? So what I've done is taken an example from my own network of my professional networks, especially in my role as an administrator and faculty member at the University of South Carolina. So here are examples of people, or the types of people rather, who are part of my network within the university, within the professional community, and within Columbia and South Carolina, so a geographic frame for my network. So this is how you would do this as well. You would think about who is in my professional network, and perhaps your network will have categories as well. Who's within the university network that you have, within your professional network, and any other connections that you have through activities that are outside of the university. So how will I sustain these existing networks? Well, I'm going to stay in touch with people. I'm going to speak to them when I see them. I'm going to send emails to check in, schedule time to meet in person, write personal thank you notes, and always help with referring and extending my network because I get that in turn. I often reach out to people in my current network to say, do you know so-and-so, or do you know who I might contact for so-and-so reason? And that's an important way that a network becomes advantageous to you as you build it. In my role as an administrator at the university, I have been working on desired networks. So within the university, I've been working to connect with new folks who I'm working with on a regular basis. So that would include other administrators, especially other associate and assistant deans, graduate directors, graduate alumni, and also working with my Carolina Alumni Association. within professional communities, which are a little different than my research professional communities. So working through the South Carolina Graduate Deans Association, the Graduate Career Consortium, Council of Graduate Schools, and Conference on Southern Graduate Schools, I'm working to make contacts and network with them. And within Columbia and South Carolina, as it pertains to professional development programming, I'm working to reach out to folks who are entrepreneurs and in the business community so that I can connect them to opportunities for programming. So this is what I'm doing to add desired networks, and I've chosen this professional community. These are strategies down below that I've actually been undertaking to help develop my desired network with these professional organizations. So it is a lot of emailing, but it's also a lot of talking face-to-face when we're together. These are some strategies that I've used. So a homework activity for those of you who are viewing the webinar is to think about your current network, your desired network, and how you will sustain people in your current network and also add at least one desired networking contact. So a few final thoughts. Follow-up is truly the key to building a networking relationship and making sure that you're staying in touch regularly. To truly have people in your network, you have to stay in touch. Make sure that you're always professional in your interactions. Of course, you may share personal information, but you want to make sure it's appropriate information to share with professional colleagues. Make sure to always express gratitude for time and effort given. Remember, networking is bi-directional and by design and should be reciprocal with the mutual benefit to be derived. Some attempts at networking can be more successful than others. I have a lot of examples of where I've tried to make a connection and it's taken a few times. So perseverance is definitely important when building your network. Make sure to practice, plan, and reflect on your strategy, and always be sure to try again. Some of my greatest contacts within my network are my peers from graduate school, who I'm able to reach out to and bounce ideas off and build on their networks. Networking can also be the beginning of a mentoring relationship. It doesn't have to be the same, but having somebody in your network can be really helpful to your professional growth and your professional success. There are a number of other resources that are available, and I'm not going to take time to go through all of these individually. But on this next slide, you'll see two resources, one here at the University of South Carolina, and also one that I've referenced a few times in today's webinar by Colleen Phillips, The Art of Schmoozing, How Networking Really Works. Before I get to questions and answers, and for those of you who do have questions, please type them in the question part of the menu for the webinar. I want to share some information on upcoming events for the rest of the fall semester. So up next, as I mentioned, is a Twitter chat with graduate alumni here at the university, from the University of South Carolina. We also have a number of programs that are coming up the rest of the year. You can check the events calendar on the graduate school website to find more information about all of these particular events. And as a reminder, as Gamecocks, our community has no limits, and neither does our network. Our network extends across a large number of graduate alumni of graduate degree programs. And as a graduate student here at the university, I hope you will take advantage of those networks during your time here in your degree program and after. So thank you for listening today, and I'm going to take a look at the questions that have been asked so far. So one of the first questions is, can we measure personal extroversion? Yes, there are resources available online to help you understand your degree of introversion and extroversion. So So I would encourage you to take a look. In particular, there are some networking resources available through graduate professional development programs. I mentioned the Kimberlite site. I mentioned the Cal Berkeley site. Those are two in particular that have really excellent resources on this topic. How can we initiate conversation when we are connecting to a person at a company? So one option is, of course, through LinkedIn to do that, but you can also search and see if you can find an email address or a phone number to try to make that connection. You can also talk to your mentors within your department to find out if they have a contact through their network that can connect you. You can also talk to alumni to find out if anyone who's graduated from your program or if anybody knows anyone who's graduated from another program who's working in that industry. Are there any other questions on today's webinar? Well, thank you all very much for your time today. As a reminder, before the webinar ends, for those of you who are viewing the webinar live, please take a moment to look under the Handouts tab. This tab is the one that is in the menu bar, usually in between questions and chat. That's where you can find a PDF of today's slides. If you're viewing the recorded version, please email gradprofdev, gradprofdev at sc.edu to get a PDF of today's webinar slides. I hope if you're a user on Twitter that you'll join us up next for today's Twitter chat. And regardless, I hope we'll see you at one of our professional development programs the rest of this fall or into the spring semester and beyond. Thank you and have a great day.